Hi, I'm your host, Dave Kemp, and this is Future Ear Radio. Each episode, we're breaking down one new thing, one cool new finding that's happening in the world of hearables, the world of voice technology. How are these worlds starting to intersect? How are these worlds starting to collide? What cool things are going to come from this intersection of technology? Without further ado, let's get on with the show. All right, so we're joined here today by Bruce Rasa. Bruce, tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Sure, Dave. So I'm actually originally a farm kid from Western Missouri, and throughout much of my career was spent in the technology industry, primarily with IBM and in roles like product management. Actually started my career there in St. Louis, where you're based, and then had a deep agriculture background growing up, and about 5 years ago, wanted to combine those two together. We started a venture known classically as the category of agriculture technology, or ag tech. It's a digital data startup that does voice capture of record keeping. And so basically, we empower food and agriculture workers to capture their insights and perform analytics while on the go. So that's kind of the overall approach and focus of our startup.
That's awesome. So I'm so excited for this conversation. For the listeners out there, I met Bruce a couple of years ago at one of the different voice conferences that I attend. And, I think what's so interesting about AgVoice, his company here, is that, I think what tends to happen, particularly with the general public who's not, really like obviously really thinking about this type of stuff, they think Alexa, they think Google Assistant, Siri, they think they're these consumer applications and it's cut and dry, right? And I think that what's so cool as I've learned more and more about the voice space and different companies that are approaching this space is that it goes way beyond the consumer applications. And honestly, I think that some of the most interesting things are happening in these non-consumer applications and in these areas of focus. So whether it be in healthcare or education or industrial settings, or as we're going to talk about today, agriculture, there are so many different ways in which we can create efficiencies, particularly for not only one of the oldest professions known to man, but for a lot of different people that are sort of working with archaic methods, and there's a lot of different reasons that we'll get into why that is. And I think that we're sort of at the cusp of why this is beginning to change. But I just think it's cool that, Bruce, he's got this background of agriculture. He's a small town farm kid from Missouri, and he's got that domain expertise, but he also has all the technical expertise from working within the computer industry like he has. So I think this kind of marriage between the two is super interesting, is sort of the backbone of where this idea is sort of formulated. So I wanted to really get into this whole thing. So why don't we just start with a little bit of an overview of how AgVoice actually works, and a little bit of an idea of like how this thing sort of came to be.
Sure. So, Dave, the way to think about it, it's a fascinating space because it seems everyone is interested in voice. Everyone's willing to try it and trial it. But we really, here's how it got sparked, okay? Mm-hmm. So about 5 years ago, many people might remember that Google did a public competition for smart glasses. And they primarily aimed at, vast majority of it at the consumer market. But when I saw the device and first learned about it as a possible successor, initially a complement, but possible successor to the smartphone itself, I was really intrigued that it could be a very useful, very practical, everyday hands-on tool to help people collect data, say, for example, in any industrial use case. Mm-hmm. And I just knew that intuitively because of my background growing up on the farm. My family still farms in total, like my father, brother, kind of uncles and cousins farm about 10,000 acres in Western Missouri. Uncles and aunts also have an apple orchard of 40,000 apple trees. So I really grew up in a really neat, fascinating, rich, diverse environment for agriculture work. And the short version is those are hands-on, intense jobs. So when a hands-free tool came along, I was interested to try it out. So the specific origin story was I threw my name in the ring, and I Google did a public competition, said, what would you do if you had this device? And I said, well, if I had glass, I would help farmers or growers connect with consumers and
Hmm.
show how their food is grown in a safe and environmentally responsible way. So effectively a type of communications platform to allow the world of agriculture to connect with the world of consumers, which usually has a lot of differences or a lot of misunderstandings. And the simple version is I was fortunate, I was selected, and went through the list of the 8,000 people selected, and only 5 of them had even mentioned the word agriculture.
Hmm.
So I kind of knew, okay, I've got this device. It has an intriguing possibility. Let's go test it. And so I got the device in Los Angeles. I flew to Kansas City, Missouri, and I went and tested it with farmers the next day. So the first place in the world that smart glasses were tested in the food production sector, anyway, at least the general purpose, mass device, like Google's device, was in Western Missouri, on my
Cool.
family's farm.
That's so cool. Yeah, no, I love that. I think that's super interesting. And you mentioned something there, hands busy, labor intensive, right? Like that's where I think that this is where it really caught my attention is
Hmm.
this notion that, you know, you think about that type of job, right? If you're a grower, you're a farmer, more times than not, I would imagine that you're doing things that are really preoccupying yourself. But I think that, like, as I've learned a little bit about your product, it really allows for them to continue to do the job that they're doing, but also sort of take care of a lot of the different, like almost like clerical work, right? Like, this is what I did today. These were the amount of bushels of apples that I picked. Here was the ripeness, kind of going like one by one. And you can do this all on the go. And I just think that's so interesting because clearly, as I would imagine that with the type of feedback that you've gotten is like, this is a really positive thing because it allows me to do my job just way more efficiently than I had been doing it. Can you speak a little bit to that idea of like how this tool serves that type of professional?
Sure. So a couple examples real quick. And in that, toying with the device, and my whole goal was to put that pair of smart glasses in a lot of people's hands, which I got to meet with about 800 people over the course of a year. People were from actually slightly more than 20 different countries. So I got very diverse input. And Dave, 2 things came out loud and clear. One was there was this screaming need for a hands-free device, right? And it's exactly what you said. It was people already with a hands-on job, sometimes a full professional job, not just, if you will, blue collar, but all of them have an escalating need to capture information as they're doing their job, and they don't want to stop their work. Doesn't sound like a big deal to many people stay in an office, but this stops 10, 20, or 30% of their day, right, to do this record keeping, which is really not, frankly, usually their talent or their passion. But the second thing that came out in their search was the voice recognition absolutely sucked,
Hmm.
right? So these people have specialized, dedicated jobs. They're people like veterinarians, plant scientists, agronomists, machinery inspectors for, say, repair or support, and they have very specific jobs. Basically, they have a very specific vocabulary or dictionary or lexicon, if you will, of things they need to do their reports. And pretty simple. If anyone probably listening to this has tried anything with a general purpose service optimized for consumers, be it Siri, it could be Google at times, Alexa or Cortana. Usually those things really are not optimized at all for specific industrial use cases,
Yeah.
right?
Okay.
The second thing, Dave, is I'd observed what has happened very, very successfully in the healthcare sector. So the quick kind of analogy there is we're loosely, somewhat, similar idea, but like in the healthcare sector, just one company alone called Nuance. I think they've done a brilliant job, kind of from a distance. I think last I understood, they have about 500,000 users that are
Mhm.
doctors, nurses, health practitioners doing this thing you're talking about, doing voice capture against healthcare records. So the big benefit to them is a reduction in this overwhelming, painful, record keeping piece. It's so critical. It's mandatory,
Yeah.
but it's quantified as a major source of overwhelm and burnout for physicians
Yep.
and other people in healthcare. And the second thing is, frankly, they're taking their eyes off the patient.
Yeah.
So just literally at a personal human level, for us to talk and communicate is so critical. If someone's hurting and wants to be fully understood, typically no one tells us they want to see the doctor typing on a computer for 5 minutes and they left. Right?
Hmm.
So that was kind of a little bit about the pain. We'd seen some other industries, healthcare, also the logistics sector was going to name Vocal Act. I think it's now part of Honeywell that use voice for the same thing, hands-free information capture, while they do their job. So we'd seen some role models and said, hey, could this be done in the global food sector?
You said a couple things there that really caught my attention. So first of all, you mentioned nuance, right? And you have this super specific domain, and I think this is really important here. Is that like kind of like to what you're building, and I would like for you to speak to this. This idea that you're creating lexicons of all the different types of vocabulary, jargon, all the different things that all the different types of agriculture workers would be using. So I know that we used when we were talking beforehand, you had used the example of if I'm working in St. Louis, for example, we have a grocer here named Deerberg's. If I'm the buyer, I might refer to the mold on a strawberry as gray mold, whereas the actual buyer, the grower for Driscoll's, who's supplying that, refers to it by its actual sort of like Latin medical name. So can you but the beauty of this is that regardless of the two, your system sort of it allows for those two to be captured, and it understands that there is a similar or a affiliation between the two, so it links the two. It knows that you're basically capturing that same data point, and I think this is really critical to understand about kind of the biggest challenge to this whole thing is you got to both create a system that's much more deep, like you mentioned, like Alexa, for example. While it's extremely wide, it doesn't really go very deep in terms of the lexicons and such. So can you speak a little bit about this fact and this notion that what you're building is extremely, from a vertical standpoint, it goes really deep, specific to the particular domain that you're building for?
Sure. So let me build on the scenario you just mentioned. So it's, by the way, Deerberg's is a fantastic grocer. And they're in St. Louis. And say they are working with a fruit supplier, like the example you mentioned. In that particular case, a lay person, could be a farmer, could be a consumer, could be a person doing an inspection in the store, would see something, say it was a little bit of mold on a strawberry that had been there for some days. It's called gray mold, right, conventionally. But the scientific name is Botrytis cinerea. That would be the term, just as you mentioned there, that say the agronomist or the plant breeders further up the stream breeding new future varieties would actually use. When we actually recognize both those terms, can rectify them because they're synonyms of each other. But that's really, really important to your point, because basically the food production system and the way we speak and the language you use is highly, highly fragmented. There hasn't been a standardization effort around language that we know of broadly, like there has been, say, in healthcare. And that's one of the things we're pioneering. That's why we are so interested to work with, great ecosystems, regions, and networks that are really, really deep in plant science or like animal health, in the case of the Kansas City animal health corridor and things like that, because they're the deep experts that we empower to do their jobs better. And so to break it down at a very, very functional level, you might read the popular press and say, oh, just use AI or this artificial intelligence thing. Well, that's really neat, but all you need is as you well know, a very, very, very large amount of data. It needs to be consistent. The running joke from what the Silicon Valley show was hot dog or not hot dog. and you train it on that, and then it knows what to do. Well, that's great. And we leverage that as a component. However, we then marry it with a super specific domain, like in your case, using the example of strawberries. In addition to that, things often still aren't perfect. We design the entire system with what's called the human in the loop. So the user always has power to correct, verify, and check on the spot, in the moment. And that's the magical combination of things that pulls all together, that we get to high 90s or even 100% source verified accuracy with the human. So that's pretty magical to us and to our users, because for 60 years, speech reco has never been that good on its own.
Well, I mean, I think that's a big, if you kind of look back on like the last like 4 or 5 years, like why this new sudden emergence of these types of technologies, I think so much of it comes down to the advancements in NLP. And and just like the accuracy of the way in which these things can detect what you're saying. And so that makes so much sense to me. But I think another big facet of this that I want to ask you about is probably what has been the biggest barrier to date. Going back to what I said earlier, a lot of these different agriculture professionals are they've sort of been using, we might think of them as like archaic methods, but a big reason behind that is because so many of them don't have an internet connection. And so I wanted to speak a little bit about, can you give us a sense of what that big picture looks like in terms of, how many actually have internet access? And then I would love to hear you speak a little bit about, what you're enabling with the edge, for current day, and how you can use the edge to alleviate some of these things. But even broader, you had mentioned some really cool things that were going on, particularly around SpaceX and some of the conversations that you've had with them. So I'm going to let you kind of share with us this whole piece around the connectivity aspect of this whole thing, because I think particularly when it comes to farmers and just different agriculturists, the limitation of internet connectivity has been the root of a lot of issues, initially here.
Yeah, so this is one of my favorite areas, because some people, look at us cross-eyed when we come in and have this idea. They're like, "Look, you're farmers, agriculture, voice doesn't work that good. Why are you at this intersection? What are you trying to do? Why could this be useful, practical for individual people, but also help a lot of people in mass or at scale?" And so
Mhm.
connectivity has been one of the absolute limiters, right? So Dave, you're on a real hot button. So an overview of things. I'm going to use a couple big macro numbers, but I'll give everybody an idea of just how vast this sector is and how fragmented it is. And what
Perfect.
also fascinates us is there's basically no platform horizontal across the industry. We know of
Mhm.
one startup in Africa. They're awesome. They have about 2 million users, but that's the biggest single company we know of currently in the world as far as digital enabling tech. So a couple big picture things, and they're big. So agriculture's been around about 6,000 years. Okay. Today, agriculture covers, as far as land mass, it actually covers about 10 billion acres on the earth. Okay.
Mhm.
I told you they were nuts. Of those 10 billion acres, about 4 of those are arable, or what's farmable, tillable land. The other 6 billion are pasture land. So there's a lot of animals and cows and dairy and so forth in the world. But what also caught our attention was the fact that the number of people in the sector alone is unbelievable, once you kind of add it up. So let me use some external numbers. So there's a group that we follow called Emergence Capital out of Silicon Valley, and they invest only in kind of enterprise and SaaS related types of companies. They were our first investor in Salesforce and things like that. So they have a very dedicated focus to this kind of category. And they recently quantified that the total number of what they've called deskless workers, but a different term they use that I prefer is first line workers,
Mhm.
is 2.8 billion adult workers on the earth. Within those 2.8 billion of the 8 sectors, guess what? The largest one, 31% of those are in food and agriculture production, right?
Mhm.
So there's this vast number, often estimated at more than 550 million smallholder farmers around the world. Those people widely are known to produce 83% of all the food on the planet.
Wow.
So it's not an overstatement to say all the rest of us are dependent on what they do every day, right? No
Totally.
surprise,
Yep.
they're in every country. So that's the setup. Dave, let's go to the problem. Problem is, literally half these people do not have connectivity today, right?
Yeah.
So there's a fascinating array of different options coming on the horizon. We're on a make a lot of friends strategy. We don't think just one will win, but let's just break down a few of them real quick. Okay, the first thing we do is, and this was hard, our service runs on device or on the edge, as it's known, meaning it runs on the smartphone or the tablet with no internet connectivity. And that was pretty hard, okay? But to your exact point, the evolution of just the last 3 or 4 years has made that possible with our hyper narrow focus and our specific focus with these users, we've delivered that with now high accuracy. And that really lights up users. And the reason is, let's get to the specifics. This is true in agriculture, construction, logistics, warehousing, any type of inspector role, if you will, oil and gas. The types of workers here is they need to collect information, often for legal or regulatory reasons. By the way, just let's go to the driver. In food and agriculture, every medicine administered to an animal in the United States and every chemical administered to plants must be tracked by law, right? That's for food safety and regulatory reasons, all good reasons, but it can be onerous to collect. But the challenge is, let's say you're one of these agronomists and you're traveling around the Midwest. These people often have pretty vast territory. About 10 or 15% of the time, though, you have no internet connectivity, slow or intermittent internet connectivity, expensive connectivity, and you don't know when that's going to hit. Mm-hmm. So the net of it is, as an inspector, you wouldn't have the confidence to know, okay, this service is going to be here for me through thick and through thin, right?
Totally, yeah.
So that's the foundational piece, kind of like a self-driving car has. We have an on-edge implementation, and that's awesome. That's our starting point. From there, now that was the setup. To your point of are there pieces of connectivity that could enable and enhance that? And so quickly there would be things at like a TV white space level, like Microsoft is pioneering with FarmBeats. We've been super impressed with. It's low cost, affordable, leverages a unique untapped spectrum. The next level up, obviously, there's the classic cell phone carriers. They continue to build out things. They're really excited about 5G, and I think it's got great potential, but that's going to take some time, specifically to reach out to those rural areas that usually are, again, in some cases, never served or underserved. And then the final one that really has lit me up, honestly, is what's happening with satellites, satellite data transmission. Basically, it's been tried for 20 plus years, had fits and starts, had economic challenges and so forth along the way, but there's a new rash of bold entrepreneurs, someone with a truckload of money that are building out what's called a low Earth orbit array of satellites. And the quick version there I want to share with you, Dave, is last spring I had a unique opportunity to briefly speak with Kimball Musk. And not a lot of people know Kimball, but his brother's Elon. A fair number of people know Elon. But they were together actually at PayPal. They've both been super successful in their own ways. But Kimball went off and still is involved in leading 4 or 5 really unique pioneering food and agriculture technology companies. Mm-hmm. He's also on the board of SpaceX, which recently got, if I saw it right, raised $1 billion to build out, I think, up to 60,000 satellites in the low Earth orbit over the next 5 years. And so, again, he's got this food background, really deep, great key leader in indoor agriculture, plus this connection emerging. So I only had one big question for him, and that was, okay, you're at a fascinating vantage point. What do you envision might be the possibilities for these vast array of smallholder farmers? Again, some of them basically don't have their first computer. Their first computer is going to be an Android smartphone in the next 3 to 5 years. And the potential for food and agriculture information collection, right? What would that intersection look like to you? And his answer, I remember very clearly. He said, we are going to deliver 5G level speeds to every square inch of the earth. Okay. So I don't know about you, but like, the Musk brothers to me are kind of like a modern day Orville and Wilbur, the Wright brothers, right? Yeah. So if they say they're going to do it, they're probably going to do it or die trying, right?
Yeah.
And I think they're going to do it.
Yeah, I do too.
So this gets pretty wild, right? All of a sudden you go, this is a really big, large worker segment.
Yep.
They have, by the way, they're highly sensitive to data needs, data interest, privacy, and security, right? They're not just going to take any old social media policies, if you will, of the consumer things and just accept those, is what we're seeing logically. They've got their own interest, their own business, and they're going to be getting connectivity for the first time. And we think that's going to happen in mass, and we think we can, serve a really big underserved market. So I know there's a lot there, but that's kind of how it all comes together.
I mean, I'm getting chills just thinking about it right now. I mean, it's so cool. Like, you see these wildly ambitious entrepreneurs that are really privatizing space. Like, I'm a huge space fan. Like, I think that all the stuff that SpaceX is doing is incredibly inspiring. And, so one of the big, I think, initial things that they're doing is this whole Starlink initiative. I think they're I've read that they might even spin it off and IPO it as a
That's right.
publicly traded company so that people could actually kind of have a piece of SpaceX. But I think that, what you kind of think like, okay, well, what are, because we've heard like Google and Facebook, like all these different companies, how we're going to connect the world, we're going to bring everybody else online. And so for me, like, I know personally, I've thought about like, well, what does that actually entail? And it's so fascinating talking with you, because what that entails is that the 50% of these agriculture workers might suddenly have 5G level internet. And like, that is so dramatically game changing that, it totally enables extremely cool applications like what you guys are building. So this is, in my opinion, like right time, right place, right time. And you guys are totally at the forefront of how we can really help to make these farmers' lives way more efficient, and just hopefully create, a higher level of output for them. And so, you sent me a couple clips before of actual uses of this. So I'm going to play these clips so that everybody can get a little bit of a better sense of how this system actually works. So I'm now going to play a couple clips here.
13:15.
13:15.
Body condition's good. 3.
Body condition 3.
Hygiene's good. 1.
Hygiene 1.
Locomotion. Sound is a 1.
Locomotion 1.
Hocks and knees 1. Good.
Hawk knee 1.
Kernel color is a 9.
Kernel color 9.
Kernel style is a 9.
Kernel style 9.
Sweetness is a 6.
Sweetness 6.
And tenderness is an 8.
Pericarp 8.
On the AgVoice portal, evaluations are listed by date and can be downloaded as spreadsheets formatted for each trial.
AgVoice Midday Report.
Yesterday's milk production up to 92 pounds. Butterfat at 3.5%. Herdsman reports 5 cows in sick pen. Note, agronomist completed sweet corn scouting.
Any disease?
Disease, Stewart's wilt found in 7% of the crop, 2% below University Extension regional average.
So freaking cool, right? I mean, I think that it's so cool to like hear this. And I'm curious, like from you, Bruce, what have been like, because you've been on the ground, you've been at the forefront of this. What has been some of the most memorable reactions that stand out to you?
All right, good question. So one of our very favorite, early users is a sweet corn inspector, right? Actually still uses the service. And think about his day, right? He's not only in places that are, typically off the grid and don't have connectivity. It may have rained the night before. He's walking through mud. He has sweet corn. Dave, sweet corn can be on any given day 3 feet, 5 feet, or 8 feet tall, right? Mm-hmm. And he's walking through this. So there can be a lot of noise problems and things, around him. And so forth, things we've got to factor in if we're going to solve this problem. But the essence of it, he has this choke point in spades, right? Wants to capture information based on a unique environment. He first tested our service with the associated kind of industrial hearables, if you will, mm-hmm. or wearable devices. He had the phone in his pocket with AgVoice on it, but he was able to drive the service without looking at nor touching the screen. And he came out of the field, and that's a true story. I have it. I caught it unsolicited on a video clip, if you need me to prove it to you. And he came out of the field, and he said, "This is 1,000 times better."
Wow. And
so, I mean, that wasn't our goal. That wasn't our number. But the main thing is, he's a really deep inspector. Here's what I mean by really deep. He, and remember, the previous way to do this job is a 2-person job. One goes to the field, inspects, grades, literally eats the corn, verbally calls out the score. The other person with them, also a trained professional, writes down the information on, a pencil and paper. Yeah. And one of them's got to go back and transcribe it later in the office. And so, but the essence of it is they already do 2, 3, sometimes 400 inspections per day of a 10 to 15 foot plot of land and plants. And those plants change every day. Yeah. So it's go, go, go.
God, that's so cool. I mean, for me, like, there's 2 things I want to follow up with this, but the first one is the hearables piece, right? Like, this is both a voice podcast, but there's also a hearables podcast. And I think what's interesting about this is sort of along the same vein, it's easy to sort of get pigeonholed into like AirPods, right? And this idea that everybody's walking around with AirPods, but there's a much bigger theme to this whole thing, which is what does intelligent in-the-ear devices enable? And I think this is a great example of sort of like another really cool application for these types of devices is that they can play host to these types of systems, so that, you can capture this type of data inputting that you are. So can you speak a little bit about what you guys have experimented with initially, and maybe what your vision is for the ideal type of device that the types of workers, and it might vary a little bit based on the type of worker, but how do you sort of envision this thing looking down the line?
Okay. No, interesting questions. I think why you and I originally connected a couple of years ago at a voice industry trade show, basically, with your all's expertise in hearables and hearing, intelligent hearing devices at Oaktree, the simple version is this has been really hard. We've actually tested, we think, 22 or 23 different devices. And so far, users love about 3 of them. And they're not the consumer grade off the shelf things, be they, AirPods or things like that. Those are great devices. They work excellent, say, in more conventional urban areas, maybe driving. But in these industrial use cases, they can be indoor or outdoor, right? There's just a wide, variety of needs. So here's, use the example of the favorite device that our users have kind of glommed onto the most. It's a very thin, light boom microphone. It's actually originally for SWAT teams, like police teams. Okay, so it's serious grade. It's actually wired, because sometimes Bluetooth isn't the ideal thing for aggressive voice capture. It can be okay for, say, digital audio playback, but the opposite's more demanding. And then the other piece is that particular device, it captures about 40 decibel of background noise.
Okay.
And no surprise, in some environments, that's mandatory to be able to do this record keeping and be consistent about it for the user. So that's one example of devices. But I think to your point, basically, there's a wide array of needs. Nobody just takes one device and say that's the perfect one. That's for everyone. So we're looking at wired, wireless, any different partners or innovators in this area. We actually don't make any hardware. We partner for that. We always want to test with it and offer them the best kind of combined solution to our users. So.
Very cool. Very cool. So the other piece to this that I wanted to follow up on is, like here at Oaktree, we have this giant warehouse, and every time I work back there, I think to myself, there's probably ways that you could make this way more efficient if you had a level of voice to it. Like I have, we get orders here. We get about 400 orders a day.
Oh, wow.
And, our process is, you pick the order, you pick the different items that order entailed, and then you pack it up and you ship it out. And so when you're picking the orders, you can imagine, like for me, I'm like, man, it would be really great if I had like a voice assistant in my ear that's sort of communicating like where I need to go rather than looking down at a sheet. Again, it's kind of like the notion of the hands busy, eyes free. And what that leads me to is this idea of like, I feel as if what you're building is really just scratching the surface. Like, I think that obviously you're starting with the agriculture side of things, but do you think that you have a potential, avenue to go into other types of industrial settings, warehouse workers, truck drivers, whatever it might be? It just seems like there's so many different types of professions out there that fit that mold of hands busy, and they're preoccupied. So it would just seem like there is a lot of blue ocean beyond just the agriculture space.
There's actually 2 pieces of that, Dave. So the first piece, I just want to go back to the origin and your insight around your own warehouse. The insight in that we're following that under and I don't know, adhere to or believe in is this notion of the workers that have a specific, even escalating need to do this record keeping simultaneously with their day job, but have no way to capture this information. It's like this escalating pain. And what I found interesting was, so one of the people we're very fortunate to work with, he's our chief speech advisor, and we work with his technologies as well, as a gentleman named Jeff Adams. Jeff was formerly at Amazon, and he actually led the research and development team to bring the first Alexa to market. And so my reason for bringing that up is, like we use our Alexa at home, and one day, by the way, it went down, and my wife was like, I can't live without that. And she said that unsolicited. So, I mean, I bring her technology all the time, and she rejects them over and over again. But, it's very important when someone's like, don't hang on, don't take that away.
Yeah.
Or get that fixed. And so the insight there is one of the very first places that, and many of your listeners know this and they experience it, that Alexa really resonated with people was that in kitchen scenario, the hands are busy or tied up preparing something, so they need some information, or they want to add something to a shopping list. And sometimes even just for safety, whether they're working with knives or hot dishes or ovens or things like that. And in that exact, precise, painful moment, Alexa comes to the rescue, if you will. It's a very basic thing, Dave. Sometimes it can be a timer. One of the very top 10 uses of Alexa, last I checked, check a recipe, add to the shopping list, and so forth. So it's that context that matters so much. So just like your warehouse, that would be a similar scenario. So in our case, we think the insight to kind of, I think what you were alluding to there is, and we actually filed our 2 patents this way, by the way. They're horizontal, or 2 filings, such that they could go across any industrial use case. We do have our hands full, no pun intended, with food and agriculture, and we love it, and we're dedicated. That's absolutely our anchor, basically global food production sector. That said, even our existing customers have said, hey, we have an insurance link. Can you help us track this for our reaching out to their farmers? Hey, I'll give you a very specific example. One of them has their own set of 3,000 dairy trucks that are semis. These are tanker trucks, and they roll every day across the U.S. They said, hey, this is on pen and paper day. We'd love to go digital instantly.
Yeah.
We'd like to do it hands-free. Could that service you have there be used for that? And so you basically what I want to say is your insight's 100% correct. Yes, our platform is one so that it could be extended potentially in the future to other places, logistics, warehouse, inspections, utilities. We get a lot of requests for utilities, construction, and so forth. So
so
times.
Cool. That's so cool. All right. So as we wrap up here, why don't you share what the remainder of 2020 looks like, like what we can expect from AgVoice and anything else that you want to share as it pertains to, like where you all are going. Because I think if anybody that's listening is like me, it's like I can't get enough. I think this is so fascinating. I want to learn more and follow you guys and just see where you take this whole thing. So share with us what we can sort of expect from you all for the remainder of 2020 and beyond.
Great question. So as a startup, it's focus, focus, focus. It's basically continuing to get this first product in the hands of our early customers. We've been thrilled with their response. Many of them are primary categories so far. Many of them are some of the largest seed companies in the world. We're very fortunate to work with them often in their R&D groups. Then often our thinking is the platform and the service as it has utility and continues to get smarter with more and more crops and so forth, different animal terms and so forth, that kind of extends as a natural standard to their agronomists or their veterinarians that they support. Those are the people that support what we call producers. Producers, if you will, are farmers, ranchers, and growers around the world. That's the very, very big number we talked about earlier. So the simple version is we're always looking for the best partners that we can help today, and that they want to solve this, but they don't want to build it on their own. We hear that over and over again. And some of the things actually, let's begin with the St. Louis region, right? Many people don't know St. Louis region has more than 1,000 PhDs in plant science today. So it's the largest collection of plant scientists in the world. That's just the PhDs, right? There's many, many others that are all skilled in different ways in this particular area of biotech. And so we love getting plugged into that community. We're a part of a group, actually, their investor is called Yield Lab. They and a group called 39 North and the Danforth Plant Science Center, which is the leading independent plant science research institute on the planet. In addition to, of course, you're right in the middle of the heartland, right? I think last I checked, it's something like, I'm certain I'll get this wrong and I'll get in trouble, but it's like Iowa's number 1 in corn production, like Illinois is number 1 in soybean production, right? Missouri has a vast array of different crops. So you're right in the heartland and in the breadbasket. You already know all that. But the essence of it is there's phenomenal partnerships and people we're working with there to get deeper and help them, support their needs. Likewise, not many people know, but Kansas City has what's called Kansas City Animal Health Corridor, which 56% of the world's revenue for animal health companies is from companies just within a couple 100-mile radius of that kind of epicenter. So, but working in that ecosystem. Likewise, California is a massive state, actually our largest in the country for agriculture in many different ways. We do some things there with kind of a virtual office in Salinas. Western Growers is the group that leads fruit and vegetable production for the U.S. It's a cooperative of farmers all pulling together. And then in New York State, there's also, again, vast resources in the Northeast, the chance to work with Cornell University, often rated as the kind of number 3 ag school in the world. So the essence of this is it's partnerships, right?
Yeah.
And they could be financial partners, but we always want to make sure we're aligned, and it's a good mutual partnership. So whether that's, investors or data partners, or end users, we're continuing to build out our ecosystem of people that we can help and help them do new things in a new way. Voice first and hearables first.
I love it. Well, I think one side note I'll say just on the topic of St. Louis, what's interesting is I think as it is with a lot of different cities, we got gutted after it had been starting midway through the 2000s, but then the financial crash, we saw a lot of different companies leave. And, it was a pretty tough time, I think, for St. Louis. But what's been really cool is the city is totally going through a rebirth right now. And one of the big bright spots within the city is totally the ag tech side. I mean, Monsanto and Bayer both being here, all the stuff at the Danforth Center is super cool. So, I mean, I think there's tons of other cities that can say the same thing in terms of, you kind of had like the blue chip companies that were, the huge legacy companies that have either, gotten bought like AB did here and they got bought by InBev. And then, you kind of see this rebirth. So just like a random side note there that I think is so cool about like where St. Louis is fitting in is totally becoming like this hub for ag tech. And I think that's just such a cool, promising area that attracts a lot of really high paying jobs. So it's good for the city.
No, I agree. But I want to add this, just don't miss this. It's not about the quote AI or the technology. There's a lot of great talent in the world. There's a lot of technology. There's a lot more coming. That's in a way been a little bit tired in the last 2 years, obviously, and we've had plenty of blowback too.
Yeah.
Social privacy related things. So we're all kind of getting smarter and wiser, like, okay, now let's get to a better state of maturity. What's a balanced relationship here? So it's not just the tech. The ag and the food ecosystem you said is, as we've discussed here, is phenomenal. It's very, very deep in the Midwest and the heartland, as many people know. And then in this case, the fun part is this new enabling technology beyond the smartphone, which to me is kind of like basically a boring computer in your pocket now. So hearables opens up a new area. So my point of that is it's the combination of things, let alone our whole connectivity discussion, right?
Totally.
It's the combination of things that look pretty practical today, are generally getting more affordable, are generally starting to work together. And it enables this really new array of use cases and people to benefit from it in a very practical, purpose optimized way. So sounds weird, but we have great users and customers and we're having fun. So
yeah, no, that's so cool. Well, thank you so much, Bruce, for coming on today. Thanks for everybody who stuck around here till the end, and we will chat with you next time. Cheers. Thanks for tuning in today. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Future Ear Radio. For more content like this, just head over to futureear.co, where you can read all the articles that I've been writing these past few years on the worlds of voice technology and hearables and how the two are beginning to intersect. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll chat with you next time.